Well, DC's Absolute Power crossover is kicking off with a very surprising move that I hope will maybe pay off in some worthwhile philosophical, dare I even say, political themes in this American election year. We'll see what happens. I'm Peter Franson from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. Welcome to Essential Issues Weekly, where I talk about DC Comics 1 week after their release on the Ultra tier of the DC Universe Infinite subscription service. In each installment, I pick an assortment of comics to talk about as a DC fan, and also explore what, if anything, they have to say about the essential issues of real life. Now, warning, full spoilers for everything that I talk about. This is your first and only warning that many spoilers lie ahead. Right now, I'm actually playing catch-up because of some vacation time I took, and so I'm looking at comics originally released to the Ultra tier on July 16th and 23rd, and originally published June 18th and June 25th. I'm not doing them in a particular in order of like where they fall in those weeks, more like just kind of saving some of the stuff I want to spend more time talking about to the end. But briefly, I want to mention a few comics. First off, a Black Label comic, which I hesitate a little bit to talk about because I tend to want to stick to just what is officially in DC shared continuity. But the Black Label stuff has shown that, you know, sometimes it does seem to, there's kind of a question in mind. I think they kind of decide that if things really catch on with readers, then they'll decide very quietly that it's part of DC continuity. I don't know. But anyway, Zatanna Bring Down the House. Issue 1 came out. This is probably going to be, I think, a mini-series, but this is retracing the origin of Zatanna, who is a character that I've not really ever been interested in, but I'm always intrigued when they revisit characters that I've found silly or too lighthearted or whatever, and try to give them a fresh presentation of their origin and what makes them tick. I'm always game for an attempt at helping me care more and invest more in characters in the DC universe that up to this point I haven't really been interested in. And this seems like it's going to be doing some interesting stuff with her motivations. This story, her relationship with her father is certainly strained, maybe some complexity there. She's actually accused at the end of this issue of murdering him. And she's also got this hang-up where she starts out as an illusionist and wanting to do tricks, as she calls them, but not really, you know, wanting, at least in her shows, to do magic, maybe not wanting to do real magic with her life. And so we're just getting the setup of the fact that, like, in her mind, she doesn't want to do magic, even though some flashbacks as a kid have her go to her dad and say, will you teach me magic? I can't get my tricks to work. And so there's pieces in play that are going to show us, I think, over time, why she so strongly separates the tricks that she does on stage in her mind from magic, and what her potential aversion is to magic, or was. I'm really into inner conflict in characters, and so Zatanna Bring Down the House is off to a good start. Wonder Woman 10, I'm still enjoying this run by Tom King. This one focuses on Diana's relationship with Cheetah, or maybe reminding or refreshing in our minds. They're very adversarial, yet at the end of the day, still heartfelt kind of friendship, as wildly dysfunctional as it is. And there were some good kind of moments, some good vibes, but it seems like we're still just kind of collecting her supporting cast to really take down the Sovereign, which is kind of the overarching villain of this run. So there's not a ton to report on here, except that, okay, Cheetah gets added to the ensemble cast. Maybe we're finally going to bring this thing to a climactic close next issue or very soon, but still enjoying Wonder Woman, and note number 10 was no exception. Action Comics 1066 is getting really close to bringing House of Brainiac to an end, which I'm fine with. Despite the premise involving Brainiac and me always, you know, being up for like an engaging Brainiac story, the addition of the Khazarnians, Lobos race, just lightened things up a little bit, made them just a little bit on the silly side, and I don't know. I'm interested in what the fallout will be from this Brainiac Queen, who is clearly going to be playing a role in absolute power, which I'll talk about maybe a little bit later. But the concept of the Brainiac Queen herself is a little bit Bride of Frankenstein and just kind of, I don't know, again, on the silly side. And so I've not been enjoying the House of Brainiac story. One exception would be this last shot of Lex Luthor and his daughter. In this pseudo backup story, it's actually more of a support story to the main story. Lex Luthor kind of enters a mental realm with his daughter Lena, trying to help her. I won't get into more detail than that, basically. But they get into this big conflict with Brainiac in there that puts her at severe risk. And at the very end, he says, "No, Lena, I won't." He says, "No, Lena," talking to Brainiac, he says, "I won't let you take her again, even if it kills me." And then on the words "kills me," we switch over to a panel of them sitting down, all kinds of circuitry and whatever plugged into them, representing that they're just lying there in a zoned out state as their minds are in this mental world or whatever. And then the next panel, you almost, I think the first time I didn't even notice the change. But partly because the dialogue balloon goes away and there's a splash for like the title of the issue or the story and "to be concluded in Superman 15." But the subtle change from one panel to the next while they're lying together in this unconscious state is that Lex holds his daughter's hand. And it's such a simple thing. But I love that we're seeing that, you know what? Lex Luthor, even though he's a terrible father, he does, in whatever way he can, love his daughter. He does care about his daughter. And we see in this story he was so neglectful of her. He didn't really know how to love her. And that's on him for the horrible life that he has lived, the horrible priorities he has set for himself. It's no surprise that he would not know how to love his daughter. And that is on him. But yet there is this little bit of complexity where we can look at this and say, he does love her, though. He doesn't know how, and he's really bad at it. And he's a messed up guy, and it's all his fault. But he does love his daughter. And I know that some, maybe feel a little bit averse to villains having these kind of likable characteristics. I think it's valuable. I mean, it's moving to me, and I think it's also valuable because the more we can sympathize with a villain, it's not that... I mean, I remember back many years ago when I saw this trend start to happen, I was like, well, what is this supposed to make me think as a reader? That, like, the villain actually isn't so bad and the things that they do really aren't so bad. And as I've said more and more recently, I've come to care less and less about what the intent is of the writer, because sometimes that can be really hard to parse through. It's the net effect of what is this story, how does this story hit me, how is it likely to hit other readers. And what I've done in recent years with these kinds of things where we're humanizing, I mean, that's a wrong way to put it. When we say that bad people are monsters and good people are humans, we're not acknowledging that humans are sinful. We are. But like when... I lost my train of thought, dang it. Oh yeah. What I've done with that in recent years is not conclude that I'm supposed to think the villains are actually making good choices when their choices are actually bad, but no, to realize that, you know what? This villain is a person like so many other people, and I can find some things in common with this villain, and that's the value for me to realize, you know what? I can really become the villain. We are all a mixed bag. We've all got some good going on. We all have plenty of mess. And I think the more our villains are kind of humanized and given good qualities that we can relate to, the more we can use that as a reminder to say to myself, Peter, watch out, because you can think you're the hero and actually end up being the villain in someone else's story. So anyway, I find this touching. I find this valuable. That, again, is Action Comics, 1066? Yeah, okay. Moving on then, Batman 149. This almost serves as a bit of an epilogue, kind of cleaning up a little bit of mess left over from the Zur-En-Arrh failsafe story, namely that Zur-En-Arrh created a clone of Batman to kind of serve as his own Robin. And that clone is still alive, and Batman tracks him down, brings him in. this clone is aging rapidly because of what Zur-En-Arrh did to kind of get him into action as quickly as possible, but there's no shutoff switch for that aging, and Batman is trying to figure out, how can I save this boy who, over the course of this issue, becomes the same age as Bruce, then older than Bruce, and ultimately dies of old age. And so it's an issue that has some opportunity for a reflection on Bruce's life, his own perspective, and kind of like a different perspective on Bruce's life, since this clone has his memories but hasn't really lived his life. So there's some interesting things going on here. I think it would have been simpler to just, not have the clone exist in the story, and then we wouldn't have this issue and we could move on. But this was, I think, an appropriate thing to do when you've got that clone hanging out there. You got to do something about that story. Also, notably, the clone decides to cut off his hand. And this seems to be a gesture intended to allow Bruce, before the clone ages past Bruce's age, cuts off his hand and allows Bruce to kind of put it in stasis, seemingly as a gift to Bruce, saying, hey, you can take my hand. It's clear I'm not going to live, or I think I might not live. Put this in stasis, you can replace the robot hand, which I've long said since he lost that hand and got a robot hand replacing it. I was like, this is too busy and too messy. This needs to be fixed at some point. And so this clearly seems to be the out that's going to give him a biological hand back. But I still kind of look at that whole thing and I'm like, why did we do that? Why was that really worth it? What was that really doing for the story? I know there's some significant value in it, maybe, but I don't think it was leaned into enough thematically and emotionally or psychologically for Bruce to justify it to me. But I'm glad that it's getting slowly tidied up. So pretty soon, I think this whole arc is going to be done, even though I've enjoyed a number of elements from it. There's been so many moving pieces going on that I have to admit I am ready for this to come to a close and for a new arc or maybe even a new creative team to take over. But anyway, that's Batman 149. Then we've got Penguin, the Penguin number 11. Not much to say about this other than Penguin really kind of hits a low point again that is reminiscent of how this series started, where his children have taken over all the crime, the underworld of Gotham. He's lost all of his resources. Much of this series was about him recruiting like some key expert team members, almost like getting ready for a heist, to go back into Gotham and retake control. But ultimately, we see in issue 11, it all falls apart. He loses all of his allies. He loses all of his money. And it looks like he's back to square one. And yet, if I remember correctly, it was like next issue is maybe going to be the last issue. It's going to close out this whole storyline. So we'll see what happens there. But I don't know. I guess dramatically it's appropriate for them to, right before the climax, make things seem really dire for the Penguin. But I'm ready to get past this and actually see how he comes back into power. His relationship with Batman now has completely fallen out. The retconned origin of Penguin as kind of a snitch for Batman that Batman allows to function in Gotham as long as he's feeding him information. That relationship in issue 11 is now terminated. And so it looks like what we're probably going to be left with is Penguin, yes, coming out on top. But how much on top remains to be seen, because Batman clearly warns him, listen, you're just a citizen now. If you play it straight, good. If not, I'm coming for you, So is he going to be, this awesome crime boss with his tendrils throughout all of Gotham when all is said and done? I don't know if he'll quite be that, but it looks like he's going to be in a position of strength. Dramatically, I just assume that's what's coming. I guess we'll just talk about issue 12 when we get to issue 12. But the Penguin 11 certainly setting up a hopefully dramatically satisfying end. Okay, so now getting into the absolute power stuff, which is making some really interesting moves, one move in particular. But before I get to what that move is, I have to highlight how this story has really made me interested in Amanda Waller and really consider her a threat. They're almost giving her Batman, well, arguably they are giving her Batman levels of preparatory thinking, where she is always, I mean, she has no superpowers, and she's not like physically imposing. She used to be really overweight. Then they took all that away in the New 52. Now they've kind of brought her back so that she is overweight, but not like morbidly obese, like I think she was often drawn for decades. But so she's not physically imposing. All she has going for her is her mind and her personality. She's not necessarily, that I know of, been portrayed as like this brilliant mind, but they are writing her in some ways like you would write Lex Luthor or you would write Batman, in terms of like what kinds of contingencies she takes into consideration and prepares. She captures this kind of two-bit, I think it's a villain that has some time travel-y type background, and basically wants him to work on using this time manipulation tech to take the fail-safe android body that was destroyed, or at least a decommission, taken out, and use this time device to reverse time to bring it back to a functioning state, because it was so difficult to get it to be defeated that it would be immensely powerful to reverse it and get it, get it working again. It would be a huge threat, not just against Batman, but against, the DC universe as a whole. So that's a powerful move on her part to do that. Well, we've got this guy who knows time travel tech, and he is just quietly acting like he's going along, but then takes an opportunity to break out of the jail cell that Amanda had him in, gets his hand on some time tech that he's able to kind of like MacGyver together, and it looks like he is totally going to get away, and teleports into another cell. And he's like, what in the world? What am I doing here? I was trying to get to like Arizona in the 1300s or something. This should not be here. And then he sees on a monitor Amanda talking to him as she did a few days prior. And so he has apparently traveled in time back to when she was talking to him, and she leaves the room he sees on the monitor and then walks into the room where he's trapped in this cell. She says, sorry, I kept you waiting. I needed to chat with your past self first. So this is totally normal to her. This is nothing surprising, so casual. And he's like, what in the world? She says, you're not the only person on my payroll with time travel experience, Star. We have finely tuned chronal routers installed all through this base. The only time and place you could travel to is here and now. So she basically, it's just such a crazy Batman type of moment. And it really establishes her as such a threat, despite the world being full of all these superpowered beings, both heroes and villains. A moment like this, and there's been several moments like this, but this is a really big one. A moment like this just makes me believe that, oh my gosh, Amanda Waller is like a planet-level threat to the superhero community, and the DC universe actually might be in really serious trouble, especially as we see the pieces that she's putting in place, of which the failsafe android is only one. I mean, once Star gets the tech to revive the failsafe android, he's like, okay, am I done? She's like, oh no, you're way too valuable for that. In fact, your work is just beginning. Now that you've modified your hourglass to work on one robot, I need 6 more just like it. And then we show this room, this shadowed room filled with what is clearly Amazo androids. 6 Amazo androids. And for those who are not familiar, Amazo is the Justice League villain created by, I think is it Tio Maro? I can't remember. But anyway, he can mimic all the power. A single Amazo android can mimic the entire Justice League's powers. And so he is just one of him, a Justice League threat. And it's the kind of threat that's like they have to figure out such a clever outside-the-box way to deal with just one Amazo android when it shows up. And now you're going to have 6 of them. I mean, they're doing a wonderful job of setting up how the heroes of the DC universe are about to be drinking from the fire hose. Another piece in play is the Brainiac Queen, which is captured by Amanda Waller, and then they use some fancy tech to basically reformat its brain. They put Amanda into a simulation with this android, Brainiac Queen, that makes the Queen believe that Amanda has lived this long, full human life of 20 years anyway. And so it gives this Queen the experience of being raised by Amanda, like equating 1 hour for every year. And she was in this simulated reality with the Brainiac Queen, reformatting all of who it is over a 20-hour period, giving it the memories of having been raised, loved, nurtured. I mean, like, the way Waller is portrayed as nurturing and loving and caring is like, she is so full of crap and she is so scary good at this. And so then the Brainiac Queen emerges totally believing that Amanda is wonderful, all the heroes are terrible, and we'll kind of see where things go from there. This is not as imposing of a threat to me just because I have not been as invested in the House of Brainiac story, and I found the whole Bride of Frankenstein thing to be a little bit cheesy, and so there's still some work to be done to convince me that the Brainiac Queen is going to be all that much of a threat. Well, I mean, she did take out all of the Khazarnian race, which is supposedly like completely unkillable. I don't even remember how that happened. I think I was so disinterested. So maybe I need to go back and reread how she did that, and then I'll feel this threat a little bit more. But at least in the meantime, Amanda Waller is presented as like such a dangerous tactical schemer. Yeah, some really great stuff here. So that was, sorry, I forgot to mention, Absolute Power Ground Zero #1. Then we get into Green Arrow 13, where some really interesting stuff happens. Oliver Queen leaves his kind of biological and adopted family back on Arrow Island to go and finish up some business with Amanda Waller, seemingly. He meets Peacemaker at the Hall of Order, as the Hall of Justice has been renamed now by Waller. And he's like, basically, okay, glad you're here and part of the team. And Oliver says, no, I told Waller I was here to assist with her armory of weapons to make sure everything she has acquired stays safe. Everything else is not my problem. So he seemingly is coming to finish business, cut ties with Waller. But Peacemaker says, oh, I think this has been your problem for a long time. Take a look, Queen. And then he shows what looks to be a tablet to Oliver. We don't see what's on the tablet, but Oliver's eyes go wide and a curse comes out of his mouth. Whatever it is he sees has a major impact on his perspective on things. And we see that perspective played out when Oliver shows up to basically stop his former sidekick Speedy in his tracks. And Speedy's like, what in the world are you doing? What's going on? Oliver says, it's my new uniform. Speedy says, whatever Waller has on you, you don't have to do this. Ollie says, she's got nothing. After Merlin, we're square. I'm making the call myself. He says, I'm not Green Arrow anymore. I'm not a rich playboy either. I'm just a concerned citizen. What in the world is he talking about? What in the world was on that tablet? He tells Speedy, you can have, or Roy, I mean, it's not Speedy anymore. It's Red Arrow or Arsenal or whatever he's calling himself, but he tells Roy, you can have everything, the island, the house, the cars, my kingdom is yours. Roy's like, I don't want any of that. I want to know what in the world you're thinking. And he says, Roy, after everything I've seen, who knows what was on that tablet, right? After everything I've seen, Waller is right. Something needs to change. This is so interesting to me because I get the impression, and it could be a false impression, but I get the impression that Waller kind of represents, when she's handled by writers, a villainized version of the extreme political right wing in some way. That's just an impression I get. I could be wrong about that. I think that's actually a little bit backwards that she would be considered that way because she's so heavy-handed in what she's doing, and the right, if they're operating according to their base philosophy that they started with, should not be about big government and big control and stuff. But I still get the impression like she's kind of seen as this authoritarian, weird right-wing kind of thing, or overlapping there, or thematically representing that in some way. And Green Arrow has just been for decades a representative of the left, and most of the time, I think, portrayed sympathetically as a representative of the left. And so the fact that he is seeing anything in common with Waller's agenda is really striking to me, especially as it happens to be landing in this election year where, once again, and maybe like never before, Americans in particular are ideologically divided, and not just ideologically divided, but as a result of their inability to know how to communicate and sit in the room with someone that totally disagrees with them, we are also more divided emotionally and personally than I think we've been in a good long while. And so the fact that we're seeing this character say, I've got some things in common with this person that has been my enemy, both in her actions and ideology, is very interesting to me. Do I think that there's some kind of a theme going on here that's going to play out? I mean, I'd be a little bit surprised if there were. What would be really cool is if they use this opportunity to not at the end of the day say, hey, Waller's a good person. I think Waller is horrible. But at the same time, as I've commented about her before, now and then she says some stuff that I'm like, well, she's got a couple, one or two good points here. She's just going after them in a totally horrible way. And I think that's something that's so valuable for us to remember, whether we lean right politically or left politically, that although we do have some core values that are very different, we do have some core values in common. I mean, I think that we would all, hopefully on our good days, say we want people to be treated well and fairly, and with compassion, and according to good moral standards, and valuing humans as worthy of respect. I think both sides of the spectrum would say that, unless you're talking about some extreme fringe version of either side, you know. It's where we most typically differ is in how we see the government's role in bringing about the better society that we all want. And so I think that the fact that they're showing any kind of common ground here is very interesting to me. Of course, I think that this is ultimately going to end with Oliver separating from Waller and realizing, oh yeah, you are still a monster, you know, but the fact that right now there is something that he has in common in terms of goals with Waller is very interesting, very noteworthy, and we'll see where they take it. But I am absolutely fascinated by this change, especially given what more we see. He says, I believe in Waller, which is like, okay, is he maybe brainwashed? That would be such a cheap, easy kind of cop-out and exit from this situation for him to be brainwashed. And it almost looks like brainwashing when Roy says, come on, let's go talk to Superman, let's talk to Dinah, whatever this is, we can help you. And then Oliver kicks him out of this building, plummeting to, you know, who knows where. He is caught by allies. But he says, I don't need your help, and kicks him out. And Peacemaker comes up behind him and says, wow, that was cold-blooded, you know. And it does seem really extreme. And so the idea of Ollie being brainwashed at this point certainly came into my mind. But then he kind of turns on Peacemaker and throws him against the wall, making it clear, okay, no, he's not just, you know, happy and buddy-buddy with all of Waller's allies in this whole situation. And then one of the characters, when Roy goes back and talks to everybody, brings up mind control. Could this be some kind of mind control? Or the bomb planted in his neck? And another character says, Diggle said they were deactivated, so Waller has nothing on him. I think, you know, of course, could these all be lies? Could these all be, you know, deceptions? Yes, technically, but I think the way there's so much that could be true in a comic book world that, you know, it could be that he's got a bomb in him and she has something on him. It could be that he's under mind control. But the way this story is being written, I think is meant to make it clear to us as readers, no, that's not what's going on. Don't let your mind go there, because that is not what is happening. We're doing something else with this story. Roy says, I looked him right in the eyes. He believed every word he said. Of course, again, we live in a comic book world. The fact that one person is convinced by another doesn't mean that the question, the issue at hand is absolutely solved. But I think we had a close-up on Roy. This is I think the writer saying to the audience, he really does believe this. And so I think we're supposed to take this part of the story at face value, that it is true. Ollie does actually ideologically believe in at least some significant portion of what Amanda Waller is doing. So all that to say, it looks like he's really in. And I can't wait to see how that plays out. Finally, in Flash number 10, we've still got this kind of trippy, other dimensional type of storytelling going on, but it is slowly being brought back into the real world, which I'm grateful for. It looks like there's some extra dimensional being that, as I mentioned previously, is bringing back the speedster enemies, the speedster arch enemies of the Flashes, like the Eobard Fawn and Zoom and Rival, and in some way is bringing their powers to bear and gonna bring some horrible doom. But so much of it is just very vague and other dimensiony that I don't really have a sense of what the threat is and how concerned I should be. But that's the Wally side of the story. On the Barry side of the story, we see a very interesting follow-up to what happened in Green Arrow 13. While we as readers are waiting for Wally to kind of snap out of the higher dimensional hypnotism that's been done on him, meanwhile, Barry is being attacked by this giant robot designed by Batman, and Barry's like, so what's going on in there? What's this all about? But he starts to figure out, oh, it's not Batman in there. Who is this person, and why are they attacking me? If you don't remember, Waller has basically put forth that speedsters are totally messing with the Speed Force and with in ways that will basically have horrible ramifications for the world, so all speedsters need to be shut down. So whoever's in this bat suit now is serving that agenda. And who do we learn is in the bat suit? It's none other than Oliver Queen. And so right after Green Arrow 13, already we see how really in he is. But he's also trying to resolve this non-violently. He's pleading with Barry, come on, just stop and, come in with me. Let me take you in, basically. And of course, Barry's not going to go with him. But it's really interesting to already see Green Arrow willing to go up against his long-term friends and allies to serve Waller's agenda. The other thing of note is Wally in this higher dimensional whatever, talking to this villainous ultra-dimensional whatever, is told by this force, this being, this otherworldly being, that the Speed Force, he says, we're going to show you what it is once and for all. Now, does this mean another reinvention of the Speed Force? I would not really be into that. They've done some weird things with it over the years that take it away and have it... It's kind of jumped the shark a little bit, especially in the New 52 when the Speed Force was like this other dimension that when we go to it isn't light and energy and stuff, but it looks like a weird Dr. Seuss book smoking crack. And I'm not really into that portrayal of the Speed Force. I'd rather it to be this kind of unknown energy field kind of thing. But I think maybe what this being is getting at is that there's a malevolent or dangerous nature to the Speed Force that they're going to convince Wally of at this point, rather than a completely new revelation of its nature. I'm hoping that's kind of the case, because ever since the Seuss on Crack version, they have kind of dialed back and made it more mysterious again, and I'd like to kind of go back to that way of thinking about the Speed Force. If they do a new reinvention, oof, okay, well, we'll see how it goes. Anyway, as for this week's ring selection, I went with the blue ring representing hope, because I am very hopeful for just kind of how much I'm going to enjoy this Absolute Power storyline. I've kind of suspected that as I've seen hints of pieces being lined up, but now with this this prelude Absolute Power Ground Zero story, which isn't the proper beginning, but is like showing you, okay, these are all the main elements in play, and then the next issue will be, boom, here we go. It's given me a lot of reason to think that some really cool stuff, or at least some very interesting stuff, is going to be happening in the DC Universe as a result of the Absolute Power crossover event. And I think those are all of my thoughts on comic books for now. As always, I'd love to get your thoughts and comments below. Which of these books has your attention? What's grabbing you about it, or what's repelling you about it? I'd love to get your thoughts and reactions. Also, remember to check out christiangeekcentral.com. There's a ton more content made for you there as we continue to geek out and seek the truth. For more chat about geek entertainment, answers to your questions, and news from the wider world of Christian geekery, get the Christian Geek Central podcast today on iTunes and other podcast services.